Hello, everyone, and welcome to Mind Your Mental. Just a reminder that this podcast is not meant to be a substitute for a relationship with a licensed mental health professional. I know they are hard to find, and I get that. I have a bunch of resources on my website if you need them, but I am not your clinician. I am a psychologist, but I am not your psychologist. So if you need any specific help, please look for the help of a licensed mental health professional. Learn all you can learn from the podcast. Enjoy the episode. Once again, thank you so much, Named Twin. I wanted to start off talking about liberation because I'm a liberation psychologist, which means I focus on understanding and addressing the psychological, the social, the cultural factors that contribute to oppression and inequality in mental health, and looking at everything you do. And that bio that I just read off, you are integrated in liberation as well. But I'm always interested in individuals' definition of it. So what does liberation mean to you?
Yeah, I have not been asked this directly in a long time. I think at its core, it's obviously for me rooted in personal experience, but it's really the freeing of all of us from these restrictive notions of who we're supposed to be under all of these systems of oppression, right? Like we can rattle off white supremacy, cis heteropatriarchy, all of those things, but at the core, that's what liberation is for me. And I think we have to figure out what our personal perspective or desires for liberation are and how those fit into the collective so that we can all move towards something that is like a bunch of puzzle pieces put together, right? But that can work for all of us. So that's what liberation is for me. Now, I often am articulating that through a gender and racial lens. Just as a Black trans woman, those are the parts of my identity and experience that folks most want to be articulated or feel the most salient to people. But I'm a lot of things. I guess focusing on the gender piece, I think as a trans person, as a queer person, I want cisgender, heterosexual people, straight people to know that you also are a failure.
Hey, everyone, just a reminder that Mind Your Mental is not just a podcast. It is also a amazing community, if I do say so myself. It's phenomenal. I mean, you get more access to me. What more could you want in this life? So if you want to join the community, if you're not already on the community, go to my social media. My social media is the same, Raquel Martin, PhD, and DM me the word community so you can get details on joining this amazing flipping community. You get more access to me, y'all. Like, I'm a delight. All right. Hope to see you there.
Under the cis heteropatriarchy, right? Like, it's not just me. Like, you are also never going to live up to these ideals around manhood and womanhood and masculinity and femininity, especially under this kind of white supremacist framework. And so how can we work together so that we can all get a bit freer? Because I want men and boys to be able to cry, right? And experience the full range of human emotion and be able to like things like the color pink and whatever interests them and experience softness and preciousness and beauty. And I want women and girls to be able to be the drivers of their own destinies and be strong, capable leaders in their own lives without having to be attached to whatever random guy is right beside them. And I also want all of us to tap into the kind of sacred power that I think our non-binary fam showcase for us every day. So that's how I articulate it for.
I love and appreciate that because one of my, I gotta remember his name, favorite accounts on TikTok, he mentioned that like having Men's Health Month and Pride Month in the same thing and the same month is genius because he said men's health is significantly decreased by their inability to think in like the aspect of like the range of emotions and expression and sexuality. They're like, so people think they don't go hand in hand, but they very much go hand in hand because the aspect of like violence that men may enact against others and including themselves is always antithetical to what may be deemed as being feminine or deemed as having aspects. He's like, he said, I think that was an evil genius who did that, because if you think about it, it's hand in hand. One of the main reasons why men have health issues is because they're trying to sublimate certain aspects of themselves, and they've never been able to actually hone in on what it means to be a man outside of supremacy, outside of patriarchy. And they were like, I think whoever did that is an evil genius. And I'm like, oh, that's a good post. I think that went over a lot of people's heads, because like it's the worst thing you could be named is like feminine. The worst thing somebody can say to you is it used to be like, oh, that's gay. That's the worst thing. Oh my God, you've attacked my identity by stating gayness. Yeah. And it's just like, that's like concerning.
It is. But also on the flip side of that, right? And I think especially for Black women, one of the worst things that we can be called is masculine, or told we look like a man. All of these conversations about Simone Biles and her muscle density, but also like her being the successful one out of her relationship. All of those things are about, okay, well, who is enacting their gender the way that we want them to, right? The way that they're supposed to, that's palatable.
Even the way we...
So it comes at all of us. I think so.
And even the way we celebrate certain things, because that whole thing with the whole, like the remix of like bleach blonde, butch body and stuff like that. I'm going to be honest. And I get it. Like as a psychologist, y'all, I get it. I think about stuff too intensely, but I did not like it because I saw it as an attack on like, what about butch bodies?
Well, I wasn't that split on that, right? But I get it, right? Because there were a lot of queer women who were like, yeah, I can't rock with this because in our community, there's so much ire to masculine women, to women having stronger bodies. Again, to the Simone Biles point, right? Like,
that's what made me think of it.
That's a butch body because she's the epitome of musculature.
And Serena Williams.
And obviously.
And like, I as someone...
Sierra, remember back in the day with Sierra?
Oh my God, back in the... Yo, she used to get... And I know everybody like... Because we're all adults now, so like we're celebrating. But Sierra used to get heat for those arms. Like, for real. I remember that. And I'm just being like... And now everybody like, oh, we love Sierra. But I'm just like... Oh, that took me back. She did. Because I remember the commentary.
And Michelle
Obama.
Like, and Beyonce at the Super Bowl. Remember Beyonce at the Super Bowl?
And now, like, it's like, I think it's not how soon we forget. Because Sierra was throwback. But like, I don't know. It's like how I feel about, this is very tangential. But like, people talk about the fact that like, they miss like messy Twitter. Like when Rihanna used to tweet, and they were like, it was a time. It was a time. Like when people like being like, like, for example, when something happened with a TLC interview, you know how they chop stuff up. And they had said something about like her doing stuff without her sexuality. And she changed her banner to like them being dressed skimpily and stuff like that to be like,
oh, yes.
It was a time, like when they actually used to like tweet, and I was just like, oh my God, like messy Rihanna, honey. Like that's when she got me. I was like, oh my God, yes, your voice great, but like I like your style.
She wasn't holding nothing back. Look, who can blame her after all she had been through, right?
I'm just saying, like, pre-mama, some of y'all not going to get pre-mama Rihanna. You see what I'm saying? Like, because, like, they not going to get it. But pre-mama Rihanna, like, it was a fun time. That's what made internet fun for me. Before these celebrities got, like, all the PR about them tweeting, and PR was like, hey, what are we supposed to do about this? Did you see what they just tweeted? That was a time. In my opinion.
That was a time.
None of y'all gonna get pre-mama Rihanna. That's about to be the episode. That's about to be the title. Pre-mama Rihanna.
I love it.
She's very much still a vibe. But so we talked about liberation. It's also June. And it's June. June is a significant month with pride celebrations, highlighting the fight for equality and recognition. However, I feel like it's always important. I think something that's always missed or that I think should be shared more is how can individuals, community, resources, how can they contribute to the growth and support of the LGBTQIA community before and after June? Like June, great. But what can we do before June? What can we do after June to do a better job?
Let's take it back just for a second, because I think that most people have this kind of basic notion around Pride Month that it's all about parades and glitter and parties and mesh crop tops. And it is that, right? But part of the reason we acknowledge Pride in June is because of the Stonewall riots. And if folks don't know, this was a seminal moment in queer history back in June 1969, when a group of folks, an ad hoc group of folks, came together, gender diverse, multiracial, anything you can imagine in terms of experience and identity. They came together, and it was a queer militant uprising against the New York Police Department, because being queer was really criminalized in this time, and still is in a lot of places around the world. And also we see the ramp ups of that in the US. But people were being arrested for not wearing enough articles of clothing that corresponded to the gender they were assigned at birth, whether they were what we would eventually start calling trans or not, right? It was also drag performers. It was also the butch-bodied folk, right? All types of people. So this was an uprising. And I think we often ignore that there is still this fight today that is so tied up in queer history around police brutality, right? Around over-criminalization, particularly of Black and brown folks, of us needing to decriminalize sex work. All of these different things are a part of not only the fight for queer liberation, but go figure, the fight for Black liberation, and on and on. Yeah. So I think there are connections here that cisgender straight people who may not care or understand why their liberation is tied up in the liberation of queer people should care. So that's one thing. How I think that folks can show up for the community year round and not just in June, I think it's continuing to elevate our stories, right? We are in a time where Gen Z is identifying more queer than ever before. Yeah. Now you can say, oh, the agenda is winning, the alphabet mafia is out here to get your kids, whatever. I'm not even going to jump into that right now.
Can I real quick though? Let me real quick though. I just want to state, for example, because I'm not rocking with that. The same. So like, I always give this example when people say that BS, like people mention the fact that like, this is a random story, but like there are more, I think it was like 50% more people who write with their left hands. And individuals are like, oh, like, what's the difference? The difference is they used to literally say individuals who wrote with their left hand were of the devil. People used to get popped and hit and caned for writing with their left hand. It's not the fact that there are more people that are left-handed. It's the fact that individuals who are left-handed are not being villainized, violence against them, and don't have to sublimate their identity. Okay. So whenever somebody says that, I'm like, right. So let me tell you how you're wrong. And I can make it a quick one, right? It's not about like the fact that there are more individuals, like it's an agenda. It's about the fact that people don't feel the need to sublimate their identity and violence won't be housed against them. Now, there is still violence against individuals who are queer and in this community, which you can speak to, of course. But when people state that stuff of the agenda, and I know it seems so basic, but it's just like, okay, so like, when did you choose to be heterosexual? When did you choose like this aspect of it, right? I remember one of my favorite creators, she mentioned that she had inadvertently come out as queer because she had written about, she got an interview during college, and they were like, oh, what's changed about you during college, or how have you evolved? And she's like, oh, I feel more comfortable with myself, and it's awesome to really embrace my queer identity more. And it was in the magazine for the college. And then of course our parents read it, and they were like, we didn't know, it wasn't a big deal. But she was just like, I wasn't hiding anything. I just didn't find the need to come out as queer because it's just who I am, right? I don't see it as an agenda, because if we talk about the agenda, we need to talk about the heterosexual agenda, the patriarchal agenda, and people don't want to have that conversation. It's the fact that people are not being, it's not that they're not being attacked, they still are, but they're able to find more of a sense of a community where they feel safe in that. It's one of the reasons why I say family of origin and family of choice are comparable, right? Because so many people were not born into the family that they deserve. And now we're in a time where you can actually build that, right? And because when I think of pride, I think of activism. It's the same way I think of Black History Month, I think of activism, right? Because you can't think of outside of that, right? Unhoused individuals, violence being enacted, and individuals who are Black and trans, people who are unhoused because of that. Like, you can't think about it outside of activism, in my opinion. So when people state that agenda, I'm like, it's a firm no. They literally used to chop off people's hands who were left-handed.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely. I mean, like, so many groups of people that we understand to be just a regular part of the rich tapestry of humanity were demonized. Look, albinism, right? There were tribes all over the world, right, that would demonize people who were born with albinism. And go figure, the greatest pop star of all time had vitiligo, right? And that can only happen in a culture that has moved away from some of those archaic notions. And let's be clear, older cultures didn't get everything wrong, right? Because there are older African tribes and existing ones still, and also older indigenous tribes around the world that acknowledged that there were more than two genders, acknowledged that queerness was a part of the fabric, and actually many of them understood queerness as a sacred thing, right? Actually as something that enriched the family structure and enriched the neighborhood and the culture. So I'm hoping that we can get back to that. And I think the other imperative, beyond the fact that there are, I believe it's 1 in 4 of Gen Z identifying openly as queer now, it's also on the flip side of that, even in that identification, when we're thinking about Black, trans, and non-binary youth, 1 in 4 report experiencing some form of suicidal attempt or ideation within a year's time. So we really need to be doing better around mental health. And I hope that our community can understand that. When it comes to allyship, even though I don't dole that label out often, and I'm not giving anybody their cookies, honey, the same, the Boy Scouts, the Girl Scouts, you ain't getting a badge from me. But if you want to strive to be an ally, we need you to interrogate the workplaces you're a part of, the institutions you're a part of. If you're in Greek organizations, how are those organizations actually building a safe and affirming environment for queer, trans, and non-binary folks? How are your places of worship, right? Like, if you really about it, you really about the word of the Lord, I need you to be able to see and hold accountable leadership that is actually violent and harmful, which we see in many places of worship around the world. And also, I think even within our families, those are some of the first places where we can start to stretch this notion of allyship. Yeah, I know it's work and it's scary, but like, you got to tell TT that she can't be going around using this slur and completely ignoring the pronouns of your nibbling and all of these different things, right? Like, those are little parts of violences that can add up to bigger violence later on. So I think it's about us being creative and innovative about what our lane is, what our industry is, what institutions we're a part of, and being able to take stock of them. Just like we want white people to take stock of the institutions that we share with them.
Yes, because I think there is some confusion about like the fact that Black people can be anti-Black. Being pro-Black is not only being pro-Blackness that mirrors your own. It's not supposed to be protect Black women until they're overweight or queer or sexually liberated or trans. It's protect Black women is supposed to be full stop. And I think one of the best ways for individuals to get that is to take in the narratives of others. I think we're only as educated as the narratives that are shared, which brings me to your book, The Risk It Takes to Bloom, on Life and Liberation, which is a memoir. I was looking at your interviews, and I like the fact that you mentioned that this book provides you with an opportunity to contribute to the narrative, but it's nuanced because stories as trans individuals can't be painted with one brush, right? How do you feel like your book contributes to diversifying the narratives and painting with more than one brush?
Yeah, well, I like to acknowledge it's taken an immense amount of privilege to arrive at this moment, to have the career that I've had, and to be able to publish on a major level like this. I am not under any illusion that so much of, I won't say so much, right, but a piece of my journey has been being educated in a particular way, articulate, quote unquote, in a particular way, and able to sustain myself with employment and all of these things, right? So with this story, I really wanted to be clear about those privileges, but I also wanted to add into the canon, whether it's the trans canon, the Black trans canon, if you want to call it that, or just like the larger Black canon or the canon of women narratives, a Southern Black trans story, because I think so often we only think of Black, queer, and trans people in these major metropolitan areas, right? We only think of the scene in New York City or the scene in Atlanta or the scene in San Francisco. But even when I was growing up, the scene in Atlanta wasn't really understood as the Black gay Mecca until I was an adult. It was very important to include that Southern narrative. It was very important to include a narrative of someone who was raised Catholic, right, and is still recovering. But also, there hadn't been narratives around what it was like to come into consciousness around social justice in the era of the movement for Black lives. And so it also felt important to talk about my experiences as a Black trans woman invested in this era of the Trayvon Martins or the Mike Browns or the Sandra Blands and on, when there were also plenty of queer and trans people who were also experiencing violence, but were not palatable enough or didn't have palatable enough stories to be seen as one of the main characters of this journey that we've been on collectively. Those are the things I really was interested in adding, and I feel really good about it. You know, it was a very beautiful capstone, I think, to that part of my life. Now I feel like I'm in a new era. But even with my family, right, I think people latched on to, of course, those bigger things, but they were really interested in my journey with my father. I really tried to talk candidly about what it felt like. That's why I joke about being a failure, right? But what it felt like to be a failure to his expectations around Black masculinity. Like, I knew I wasn't going to grow up and have the life that he imagined for me. And that was a problem. And I know that that is something that binds a lot of us within the Black community, is that we feel like we have to have a particular, live up to a particular image. And then when we don't, then we're really hard on ourselves, right? And then go figure, the outside world, white society is hard on us too. But we can all just be failures together.
We can all be failures together.
Let's fail these gendered expectations and create something new. If you're divorced, make it through that, and there's something on the other side, right? If you can't have children, and I say that as a woman who is infertile, but I know that my journey as a infertile trans woman is tied to the journey of infertile cis women and intersex folks. We can fail on the reproductive tip, but like, what else? We can also create new things, right? We can also still be parents and guardians and lovers and build beautiful families and all of that too.
I love that, because I think it's inextricably linked with, like, I tell a lot of people, especially within the Black community, that like there's a difference between legacy and lineage. And I'm a firm believer that like my children are my lineage, but they are, I don't want to say they're not my legacy, but they're not the only aspect of my legacy. And I think with the Black community as a whole, we limit ourselves because the expectations that you mentioned of failing your dad and that so many parents have, that's their expectations. And as a parent, I know I had views for my children before they were even born, but that's more about me than them. I feel like being a parent teaches me more about me than it will ever teach me about my children, because my children will teach me about themselves, right? But there's this aspect of like, people are like, my children are my legacy. And I get so much flack for that. I'm like, your children are your lineage. All right. Your relation, you are your legacy. And sometimes they limit themselves because they weren't able to be what they wanted to be, or they weren't able to achieve the goals that they wanted to achieve. So they put that on their children. And as a psychologist, I always let them know it's never too late. It's never too late for you to do what you want to do. Right. Because so many times it's just like that was with the Black community, it's so linked because it's just like, they were their legacy. We didn't know if we were going to survive. Like we put all of this into the children, but like, I think that these other communities, they survive so that we can thrive and flourish. So like, thank you for that. Mm-hmm. But also it's not too late for you. I hope that my children realize that like, I'm my legacy. My work is my legacy. Yeah. How I leave you feeling after I converse with you is my legacy. The values that I hope my children have, that could be an aspect of my legacy, but they may choose that some of my values were trash and they're like, mom was nuts. like my children are my lineage, but I'm my legacy. How I leave people feeling after that's my legacy. And I think it's really hard for Black people to get that. Because when I say it, I'm like, oh no, I'm my legacy. This art, this work I'm doing, that's my legacy. Like my children feeling affirmed and being able to go toe to toe with me. And as a result, any other adult, because if you can go toe to toe with your moms, you can go toe to toe with that boss who lost their freaking mind thinking you're going to work during your PTO, like it's nothing. My children are my lineage. Mm-hmm. And I think Black people, I really want y'all to understand when you think of that, anytime I have the conversation, it's like, well, I want them to achieve what I didn't. See? Okay, so let's talk about what you didn't and let's leave them out of it. Leave them out of it. Yeah. You know, like let's go.
And why do you feel like the story is over?
It's never too late, right? It's never too late. It's never too late, y'all. I'll fight with y'all. I'll go toe to toe with y'all all day. I'm from Philly, North Philly to be specific. You know what I'm saying? But like, your children are not your legacy. I'm my legacy. My children, parenting teaches me about me. My children are going to teach me about them. Like people, I'd be like, legacy? No.
And I feel like such a huge part of it, and it's not just in the Black community, although it's particularly heightened, it feels like for us, because we're in the thick of this, right? What else do we know? But an overcorrection, right, around are people having been property, and are people still dealing with the lingering effects of feeling like property, because we're still exploited, still dominated, all of these different things, especially financially. Yeah. And wanting to own something. And so it is convenient to own this person that you birth into the world, right? It's acceptable to in our society. And then to also want to own their trajectory and their future. Yeah. And we have to be able to interrogate that, because we also police each other. Yep. Right? How many times somebody walk into the space like, why she wear that? Oh, she want me to use what name and what pronouns? Oh, who does she think she is to demand something else of me? And it's like, we got to relinquish some of this, boo. It's enough out here for you to be worried about. You ain't got to be worried about me like that, right? You ain't got to hold on to this other person's way of navigating the world and future in that way, right? Especially when it gets to be harmful and restrictive. Because then it's just a mirror of all of the things that you tell yourself.
Amen. Well, you know what? Name twin, boo. Can I call you that? I will.
Yeah. Call everybody boo. I don't know.
No, Raquel, I want to be special. You're not allowed to call anyone else that. I want to be special. This isn't about that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Dr. Boo.
Dr. Boo. Oh, yeah. Okay. Yes, I like that. Thank you for coming on the show. Tell everybody where they can find you. It'll be in the show notes too, but I want to hear you say it as well.
Yeah, so you can find me on all socials at Raquel Willis, RAQUEL WILLIS. I assume y'all know how to spell Raquel, because obviously. But I'm also at RaquelWillis.com. The title of my memoir is The Risk It Takes to Bloom. I also host 2 podcasts. Ooh. One is called Afterlives, which investigates the lives of trans people we've lost too soon. The other is Queer Chronicles, and this first season focuses on queer and trans youth in political battleground states across the U.S. Yeah, so check out all of that stuff.
Check it on out. Thank you so much for coming on the show, everyone. Thanks for tuning in today. Remember to be kind to yourself. 2 steps forward and 1 step back is still 1 step forward. That is just math. Have a good rest of your day.